Because the question we asked ourselves in the beginning of the day is, let's dream. And the grand dream, Peter, was just assume, we would have 20 million euros. Assume we would have that. And we had 4 years of our valuable life, and we have all those bright complexity scientists. Where the hell would we spend it? Well, spending isn't difficult, but how do we make sure we get something out of it that will revolutionize the world? Thanks to Lex and Roman, you've given us a couple of ideas from your perspective. The industry, the business, and the perspective of, yeah, Lex, I think you've gone through difficult times. Gosh, you made a mess out of it, all you financial regulators and stuff. We all trusted you to be fantastic and perfect, etc. Yeah? But guess what? We have lived in a complex world for a long time, and we're not going to resolve it in the coming 4 years, but maybe we can add a little thing to it. Before we do that, I think we should ask the two people, Ian and Peter, to say a few words. Ian is head of the Exact Sciences Department of the Dutch National Science Foundation. And I'm not an exact scientist. I am part of Peter's group, which is the social and economical sciences, behavioral sciences. Would you want to start? Oh gosh, there we go again. Yeah? And they have an opinion on everything. But could I ask you to say a few words yourself? Is complexity science for real? I mean, you were there at the beginning 5-6 years ago when we started all this. Do you feel we should make a next move, and in what direction should we go? Is grip on complexity the right word or not? We need one more. I use this to save my voice.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, just a few personal observations. Obviously, the first question that you raised, if you had 20 million, would you spend it on complexity? The answer would probably be no, obviously.
They don't like that answer, that's the wrong answer.
So now you're disappointed, I can really react to this. I have been part of this audience for some years now. Started off 5 years ago when you started off the complexity program. Basically, the personal history is something of importance. In my formative years as an academic, agent-based modeling was a hot topic. I think it's about the same time as Charlotte did her PhD on agent-based models. You did a wonderful work on the monkeys. Yeah. So that was really something special, and for a long time it sort of, and that's what Lex also indicated, sort of faded away. And then looking at from a wider perspective into the social sciences, many of the social sciences have experienced what they call a behavioral turn. That includes economics, but also sociology, is that the agents seem to be far more important at the loss of what Lex called macroeconomics, but for social science in more general, we basically started to lose track of any insights or new developments at system level. Now, I think that's true for other disciplines as well. If I look at my colleagues from climate research, they've come back to system analyses a number of years ago. So in many disciplines, you find a renewed interest in system analysis and trying to come up with useful insight, not at the level of the individual agent, but at the level of the system as a whole. Now, that was one of the reasons why 5 years ago I was interested in your community, because I thought this might be one of the options, basically to sort of get a new angle in getting stuff done at system level. Politically, it was also rather complicated. We had Margaret Thatcher who said there's no such thing as a society. We have individuals, we have families, and that's about it. And to some extent, people started to believe that. If I look at other issues like the downside for the epidemiologists, the medical science has moved completely into randomized experiments. And then the economists starting to taking that over, calling that golden rule research. We have the randomizers, as they call themselves, that actually want to test anything in a controlled experiment, while the first thing they do when they do an experiment is they do away with the context, because it's in the way. Now, so there are many issues, I think, if you would look at different disciplines, that there is a new need to come up with a good systems approach. So I think that complexity science might be one of the potentials, as some of us called it today, and basically that's things why, as a person and as an academic, I've always been supporting it. There might be a new need also in the upcoming period to come up with more relevant research results at system level. If we look at the grand challenges as they're being defined within Europe but much wider, then if we look at the social science or economics or whatever, we're not delivering the goodies, and people sort of get anxious and they want us to be more relevant. Now, relevance doesn't mean that you start applying things or sort of take knowledge from the shelf and then sort of repackages and then deliver it to the industries. The idea, obviously, is to come up with better insights and better research. Now, again, complexity might have the potential to do that. Then, having said that, we must admit that complexity is an elusive concept. Look at the title of this meeting, Grip on Complexity. So it is elusive, and we're moving along, and I'm very happy to see today, if I compare it to 5 years ago, that there is a rapidly growing community and that we have applications of complexity science in a variety of fields. But I also understood again today, like I did 5 years ago, that there is still a need to develop a common language and to sort of be able to transfer concepts from one discipline to another, even though the potential of complexity would be that it is a potential again to sort of come up with more universal issues. Now, there are two things I would like to pick up of today's meeting. I've learned a lot of things, but I think my neighbor to the left of me, Carla Jaeger, said two things. If we want to move further, make sure that you take up challenges. So don't get stuck in the community of complexity scientists, but as a community, move towards the real world. Try to address real issues. Don't promise to solve anything, but say you'll do your utmost best to provide more relevant knowledge. Now, I think that's a major challenge. So that would be one of the things I think we could do to move ahead. And the other part, which was directed at funders' advice, which I now understand I'm here in that capacity, is make sure your money goes to small groups. Now, that was a relief to me, obviously, but it's more serious. If I look, we've been supporting it, both our divisions, complexity science, for the last 5 years now, and it's all been targeted to smaller groups that could actually use network analysis and whatever you have within complexity to really show that it has added value. And if I look at the presentations out here in the hall, I think there is added value. But I'm also very much aware that this is a starting point and that you would need to further the community across disciplines and to make sure that others than the traditional funders would be interested. So I was indeed very happy that there is an interest from the industry. I would be very happy if there was interested from public governance on that sort of issues, because basically I think this needs and deserves a much wider audience than just two funders with a lack of money anyway.
Thank you, Peter. I get the feeling he's going to spend it anyhow. Thank you. No, Peter, thank you. Very, very good comments. Ayan.
Okay, let me first tell a little bit more personal story. When the first round started of complexity, I was certainly not part of the physical science board yet. In fact, I was more or less in your position, Peter. The reason I stepped out is because I joined the board. So I have been there, involved in writing the first round of the complexity program. I've been very much involved in that. In fact, I'm also one of the scientists as a mathematician in the field of pattern formation and dynamical systems. I'm working together with a group of, say, environmental scientists at Utrecht University on problems in sudden transitions in ecosystems as one of the projects within the present program. I'm also, and that's one of the things I would like to connect to the discussion of this afternoon. I'm director of the Lawrence Center. We organize workshops, and one of the very nice things we have been doing now since 6, 7, 8 years, or we started out as workshops in, say, the physical sciences, mathematics, physics, computer science, astronomy, but since 6, 7, 8 years we have a much broader scientific spectrum, and one of the things we're doing is organizing workshops at the intersection of the sciences, the humanities, and the social sciences. And it struck me a little bit today, although in the break people made it all a little bit more, say, flexible, that the discussion we had here was quite a discussion like the previous century. We have already shown at the Lawrence Center, but not only at the Lawrence Center, that there are many people at both sides of the scientific spectrum that want to work together, that just don't discuss about it, or whether it works or not, that just do it, that are both sides or triple sides are aware of the fact that they need to learn, that they can learn, that the physicists know that they have to develop new theories to understand things going on in the brain or in crowds, and the other way around. So I think we are already much further than part of discussion we had in the afternoon. And also that's what we see over here today. So the last thing I would mention, myself being chair of the board, but I think that's the reason I'm here right now. We also don't have 20 million. In fact, we cannot even share it together. I don't think we have 10 million to spend. But we do think, again, within physical science, that all challenges, serious challenge to our society on this planet, have a transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, whatever, not element, dimension, they are essentially interdisciplinary. And this is one of the things we really think it's very valuable to invest in that. And in that sense, complexity is one of the core subjects we see as important within the field of the division of exact sciences. And we truly, and it's all the same story whether I'm a mathematician or a director of the Lawrence Center. Real progress is in working together between scientists of different fields, but also between industry, banks. This is where the real work should happen, and this is what we want to work on in the next couple of years.
Super, thank you. All right, this is a panel discussion. That means the panel can discuss with themselves, or you have points or questions or whatever. But I have 2 questions prepared. Is that allowed?
No.
If you think it's boring, then just stop me. The first question, you said no.
Here, Peter.
First question is a question as a scientist. Here you go. You do all your good works, etc. You've done your research, and it all fits. Then you go to the editorial boards. That is complexity science? No, we are Journal of Transportation, or we are operations research, or we are, well, apparently the medical profession has got less problems with it. And then you go, oh, MISQ, that's one of my favorites. Management of Information Science Quarterly, huh? Or management science, or those things. Oh, no. What is that? Am I the only one that's got those problems? And then you go.
I think all the interdisciplinary studies.
We have some more. You know.
I think it's a general problem for any interdisciplinary studies. My field is in gender studies. So the political science journals will tell you, is this political science? And the sociology will say, is that sociology? And the historical journal will say, is this history? And what you have to do, I mean, if you are in this interdisciplinary in a science ecosystem that is organized by disciplines, then you have to do the work and explain to that particular discipline of these journals what it is that you're doing, and make yourself relevant and make yourself understood. You have to do some extra work and start some new journals.
Brilliant. I was hoping you were going to say that, because there are new journals coming up. But don't you all agree that we should try to create a communications platform if we want to talk together about what we call complex systems or whatever, and do it open access? Am I the only one suffering from that problem?
I do think I'm sorry that I disagree a little bit with you, Peter. Sorry, also to open a discussion. I would say that, I do recognize this problem when you apply for funding. Then that's really hard. Then you get a referee from one field that doesn't like you, and that kills you, especially since we are not very good at funding in the sense that we don't have enough money. So I agree with that. But I think in publishing, for instance, the big important science, nature proceedings, National Academy of Sciences, they do like interdisciplinary. I mean, as a mathematician, it's impossible to submit a paper to, you can submit it, but will not ever be accepted. But when you work together with people in environmental science, the door is open. So I would say, let's put this from the positive. Let's not sit together, oh yes, it's such a shame we cannot publish our paper. We can publish papers, say twice. You write it for this community, and you write a more mathematical, and these are different papers. So let's not see this so negative. I mean, I would say the fact that you work in different disciplines opens up many more ways to get your result published. You are open to many more different audiences. And of course it's good to have a special journal, but I think there is plenty of opportunity to get, say, interdisciplinary work published. Sorry for that.
Sorry for that, this is absolutely right. I mean, we all agree, yeah? All the young scientists here, we all agree? No, they are silent. It's not as if they all agree. Who agrees it's difficult? No one agrees it's difficult, it's easy.
I do not agree.
You agree, yeah?
No, I don't.
No, you don't agree.
But I think we have to distinguish between doing interdisciplinary work where you, for example, go to environmental science, and in my case it is hydrology or something, then it's easy. But if you really have two fields of science, like you do sociology and psychology, then it gets difficult. So it's a theoretical field. And if you combine it with something practical, it works out. You know, they love it. If you do complexity, water resources, you can do anything.
I don't think we disagree. I think, but the message Peter brought, oh, we'll never get our papers published. There is a very positive side to it. But indeed, I also have problems getting papers published exactly for that same reason. But overall, I would say there are positive aspects and there are negative aspects. And I have a feeling that the positive aspects win the game, but I'm a very optimistic guy. So maybe we can, but I do absolutely agree that it all can also be very hard. But overall, well, let's not look at it only from a negative point of view.
We always look at the bright side of life. I mean, that's why we're here. Thank you.
Could I point out two other things? Because Arjen brought up the probability it's sometimes hard to get funding. And to some extent that's true. In particular, if you sort of promote it very much as interdisciplinary research, you run into issues. Now, there are two ways. The first is, and actually I think that's what we did 5 years ago, is to create a niche where people could actually flourish. But actually the next step is taking it forward and making sure that within each discipline, complexity analysis is acknowledged as an added value. I mean, if you sort of sit around and sort of complain on it's so hard, etc., not doing the effort, you're certainly not going to get there. So, and I think that looking at the research that's being done, you're very close to it. The other observation I would like to make is if I read my papers, and in particular professional publications from other people in the social sciences, they're all about self-organizing systems. People are borrowing your concepts without giving you the money to actually sort of do some fundamental research to take it a step further. Now, obviously that's a bit of a joke, but it's also serious. But if there is so much interest in society in these sort of concepts, then you shouldn't sit down and wait for others to come and ask you. You should go over and say, well, you're using my concept, but you're not using it in the right way. Could we take it a step further?
I think, Peter, you've taught me, actually what I've started to learn and value so much today is that we've got to learn to communicate. We've got to start to understand this better, have a common language, common vocabulary, but actually bring it across.
The same question. I think indeed if you approach it from the relatively narrow question of getting things published, I can understand the responses, and I probably agree. And perhaps the situation is not bad, but indeed, looking at it from a constructive point of view, I think there's great value in, let's say, organizing, creating the conditions for a community growing further around, let's say, the issue of complexity, and further developing the communication and developing the language, and not only engaging, let's say, the scientists, but also what we call today the practitioners. And without denying, let's say, all the nice opportunities that are there, I think there's a lot of potential for progress there.
Peter, if I may, I would like to comment, because I was a guest here today, not being a scientist at all, hardly ever having seen a university on the inside, and definitely an entrepreneur and from the corporate life. And I've truly enjoyed the day. Let's put that first mark. I've come here willing to open up myself as a very sort of strategic, tactical entrepreneur, to open up to a more abstract level. But what I find interesting is that there's first of all, in the scientific field, your master's at creating the issue of complexity into a more complex than I think is needed. Secondly, when you say, oh, well, it's really hard to get funding and we've got to do a lot. You know, if I have to go for a budget for a project in my company, and it doesn't matter whether you co-own it or not, you have to go to extreme lengths to communicate, put your case forward, win people over, make them see the sense of doing this, make them part of the game, not lecture them, but make them part of the whole route, make them see the benefit of the possible outcome. And that way you do create a community, you get people on board, you get people on your side, and those are people from scientific fields, from all walks of life. We work with all sorts of people. And then you get a project together. And I have the feeling here, and I'm probably intimidated because, you know, I'm not a scientist, but if you actually are capable of intimidating me, you really have a long way to go before you start to communicate with the business world. Because many people in business are quite scared of me when I get into my field and realm of where I feel at home. So I would say that really the one thing I would do, first of all, is really sort of start to think about how you table the topic of complexity and reach out. And really make sure that people don't feel intimidated, that they feel part of the solution.
How do we do that, Connie? That's your profession, isn't it?
That is absolutely my passion. It's absolutely my passion. And I think part of it really is far more than sort of telling people all the time what you know already, is build the bridge and make it relevant to the people who are listening. And although audiences are disappearing in the modern society, I think that's another thing. I hear you talking about papers, and I'm sure that there are, you know, huge ways of, you know, getting papers approved, etc. But I just have this question, like, but before you write a paper the proper academic way, why shouldn't you write a few blogs about it to get public interest and feedback? You know, why do you have to sort of...
You might get ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but why do you harness this? You know, it's not yours. Science is there to advance society. You know, we love you all, and we love to put money into science because we want society to advance, but you're not there for well, whatever. Let's not use the word.
Okay. Can we ask you, Carlo, to give a response to that?
I had a question. Actually, I have many thoughts. About it. Let me start with your final thing about the blog. I see the world of science in transition. I think we have a model of academic publishing that's dying right now. It will take a few generations, but I welcome that death. You may know that the current Nobel Prize winner in biology just declared his lab will boycott science and nature and Cell. And it's worth reading how he justifies it. Nobody will dare claiming that this guy would not be able to publish there. It's easy for him. He's disgusted. So that's one part. I'm not trying to share the disgust. I'm trying to share the enthusiasm over the internet. So there's something to be said against the internet, and it's going to be worse in the years to come. But in terms of generating ideas in the field I'm working in economics, the most interesting stuff is happening on the web for sure. And the journals, that's the graveyards for once the research is finished. I do understand, I've been through it, that if you have to build a career, you fight for your life. And it's an emotional thing, and it's scary, and the only thing I can say is you have to persevere. It's like looking for an apartment. You go, you ring, you don't get it, you go to ring the next, you don't get it. You can get it if you really want, but you must try. But that's not what you were talking about. You were talking about this communication aspect. I fully support this view that the sort of thing we are doing right now can live through meetings like this and through the internet. I show the website with a purpose. I think, I spend more time reading web stuff now, academic web stuff, than journals in the narrow sense of the word. Because what I read in a journal is 3 years old. I want to know the stuff when it's fresh. And archive in physics does this since a long time. So I support that. I think it's also important to say something about personal communication skills. I like sports. Most really great sports people are poor communicators. They get a lot of training, they end up being in TV and not making too stupid remarks, but they are simply not good at it because their specialty is something different. I think researchers are the same. I guess I'm kind of gifted a little bit in this trade, but
This is on the internet now, Carlo.
No, but I think it's important not to try to turn every researcher and scientist into a great communicator. Let him be a great scientist, and that's enough. But in our community, we need some people whom you can send on CNN. And they need to be recognized and praised. And we had Barabasi on the screen. That's the sort of people I'm talking about. This guy you send to Davos, you send everywhere, and he can communicate. So we need people like that. It must be recognized, appreciated. But at the heart, a good researcher is a good researcher, and usually is not a good communicator. In mathematics, I think it's fair to say it's the worst. Computer science is the same.
No, it's also about behavior. It's not so much about being a spokesperson, because that literally you can learn. It's about your behavior in one-to-one meetings and in meeting people of the other species.
I agree, but there is research.
Emphasize species.
There is research about it, and the ability to stay mentally focused for a long time on something that only 2 other people on the planet understand requires a very special personality. And people who are good at that very often are not very good at socializing and this sort of stuff, and that's perfectly okay. So, number one, I'm in favor of using the internet heavily, massively, supporting a minority among us who is good at communicating to the outside world. But let's have the courage to say, we are basically in research, we are about solving problems, and if somebody is good at that, that should be encouraged. I don't go into the funding issue. The funding issue, I agree with you, that's a different and actually very tricky thing. But I want to encourage all the young people in here. The truth is, if you go into these interdisciplinary things, the risks are higher. You just have to be clear about it. If you make it, the rewards are higher too. So it's true that science loves these things. It's also true that getting into science is not exactly an easy game. And if you are at a young stage of your career, I've had collaborators who consciously decided not to go the interdisciplinary track, and I supported them. I said, look, if you feel like that, it's okay, you have to build your career. I like better the kind of people who are a bit more risk seekers, but they must know, yes, there's a risk, and you take it because you think it's fun, it's interesting, and the reward is there if you survive.
Well done. Do you mind, please?
Okay. I have a question about interdisciplinarity. So one step back, and I would like to ask the panel, how do you see interdisciplinarity, especially in the spectrum of highly formal models and more qualitative models? And I should confess that I'm the project leader, I think, of arguably the most qualitative project which is currently running, using discourse analysis and other approaches, although sometimes we also use quantitative data. And I did 1 year of mathematics, so I can follow some of what
Anyone
seen here on the
specific in
screen.
the panel?
And I was triggered by the question by what Lex was saying, that on the one hand we're dealing with uncertainty, radical uncertainty, but then also you express your preference for formal modeling, for use of mathematics.
Lex?
And I thought today I haven't really seen an example of kind of interdisciplinarity where this spectrum comes together. So, your view on this?
Lex?
Well, perhaps I didn't express myself too well that I'm, let's say, in favor of formal modeling. I think it is very important, but it should be combined, at least in economics, with history, understanding things, qualitative elements. How to do that? I have no definite answer there. But there is in economics, there is a tradition where indeed there was a different combination of using, let me call it, different techniques. I recall that let's say one of the great economists of the beginning of the century, Alfred Marshall, described his methodology and said, well, I really have to start with a model to make to check my own consistency and to sharpen my own insights. But when I've understood the problem and if I made my analysis, I burned the mathematics. Because you only really understand something in economics and social sciences if you're able to explain it in words. Otherwise, it's not good. So, and I like that methodology very much. I think we need indeed for describing, analyzing complex systems. Doing that without mathematics would not help us a lot. Where I have more problems in economics again is if we think that let me put it another way, the models that we have are really descriptions of patterns and are not a full model of the actual world. And I think the trap that we have fallen into in economics is to think, is the invention of econometrics. The idea that we could estimate stable, quantitative, macro models. And I think there you need really to have the other elements. For instance, in economics, I already mentioned history. Let me take a very actual question. If you want to understand the evolution of European integration without knowing the history, I think you never really understand it. And I see a lot of examples of that around me. Other issue is that, and there's an interesting issue for the discussion and the interaction with the people from what I would call the hard sciences. Let's say our individuals, our small particles, are human beings. And human beings are moral subjects. And the role of morality and ethical systems and how they evolve, I think is something that you cannot just analyze with models, but you can also not do it without. That's my view.
Do you mind, Jaap? I'm very concerned about the audience. I'm really. Do we feel like another few minutes? Jaap?
So we have to use imperfection and incompleteness in our models and look at. But you're talking about morals. How important is do the banksters think about this? That's a combination of gangsters and bankers, you know, about this subject. Could you organize that we get a doubling of the 20 million from the banks?
I myself.
No, your friends.
No,
Your friends?
20 millions, I don't know, but I think we should be able
really
at least to discuss with them that the type of issues that they are grappling with, and that society at large is grappling with, could well benefit, as I said in my presentation, from doing some additional research in this tradition. And as said, it's not just there. I fully agree with what I said earlier. Just waiting until others pay. You should try to work, and then further build and let it grow.
Are you familiar with the work of Professor Carlotta Perez from London? She charted the history of about 7 learning curves where there were enormous boom times and then sudden crashes. And she found out that these learning curves have about 4 different phases. And the good news is that we are halfway, a fantastic growth, but the crash is halfway. But we have to go from the second to the third phase. We have to make a difference in the structure of about 5 different institutional systems.
One of them being?
No, the governance, the governments, finance, how you run research and development. But it has been described, and it is very relevant. I suggest you look at it. It's for free. It's free advice.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's not worth 20 million, but a lot. Thank you.
It probably is cheaper, but never know. Let's not focus so much on the 20 million now, but that was the second part of my question. So that is not so much this 20 million, but probably what Connie also told us. What should we do particularly well as a science community to get the real keen interest from industry and government? And maybe that's a good opening for you.
Yeah, so I think one of the things also we have to be conscious of is the timidity in a certain extent of the discussion, if I can reflect on that. I was at INET in Oxford last week, and we had a discussion of where is the state of interest in complexity. At least some people there thought that they were being pushed by policymakers rather than pulling, than science trying to offer their views. It's very difficult to estimate these things, but we have quite a unique configuration here. Is we had this huge financial crisis, which everybody recognizes that it was a systemic thing, so it's created a different language. And I think that's opened up things like the initiative of the Resilience Alliance, et cetera, is all in that context. We're here in a country that is deeply dependent on trade and its interconnections with the rest of the world, a very deep services sector. And the recognition that the future issues, the grand challenges, are all about large systems, whether it's better financial system, green growth, all these other things. And we're here in the Royal Academy with the Science Foundation where the funding is, and it almost feels like we're setting up a skunk works, right? Another way is, does this need to be reframed as a rather strategic issue? It just seems it's being framed as something too small. And I think that's quite important in order to attract attention more broadly, is the way it's framed and set up. And without being grandiose or megalomaniac, I reflect on the discussion I had in Singapore, where the complexity agenda is framed as strategic for the future of the country. Not by, I'm sure you can find some minister who will tell you, I don't know what this is about, but at a very high level, it's recognized that it matters to the future of the country because of where we are in history and because of the challenges that are coming at us. And again, given what this forum is, and to answer your question of how we get more recognition for this, it's also framing it appropriately and daring to make it as big as I think it should be. I mean, I'm thrilled, that now there is this community of complexity people here, and you hear it more and more around. But let's not be too humble about this, and not out of ambition, but because it actually matters to the world a lot. So sorry to be pontificating, but I didn't want to get this.
We're used to that. Lex, closing comment?
Well, I think I finally have the last word. Thank you. No, I think you have to...
I'm not so sure, Lex.
It was a false hope. No, I think you again, I'm talking again about, let's say, my environment, but I think you have to reach out to the policymakers, to the supervisors, and they are grappling with a lot of issues. And if you discuss those issues with them and show them that, let's say, this complexity perspective can help them at least to think about solutions, I think you will have a good chance of making progress there. But you have to link them into the discussion. And I'm now just remembering a meeting that I had some time ago with our Minister of Foreign Affairs, who sometimes invites a couple of economists to think aloud. And I think he is in particular, he is grappling with the issue of the relation between the government and society, and he sees all the changes coming through the use of the internet and different communities being formed, and how to deal with that as a government. I think that type of issues, you start to discuss that, and you offer the complexity framework to think about it, and then introduce him to, let's say, the things that we want to do in the coming 4 years. I think, yeah, that's the way to do it, and not pedantic and not lecturing, as Connie said earlier.
Thank you very much. It's probably just that our foreign speaker, our keynote speaker, closes the panel then with a few comments.
Well, I just tried to, being Swiss, make some remarks about money, which I hope will be useful to especially some of the younger people. What I say may be wrong for the Netherlands, and I'm happy to learn. The world I live in, and it's not just Germany and Switzerland, is such that industry has given up funding research that's not very, very closely connected to what they are presently doing. Large industries have foundations for that purpose. In Germany, Volkswagen, for instance, has a fantastic foundation. Munich Re has a foundation, and so on. The foundation tends to fund research that the people in the core business like. So it is good to have contacts with industry, it's good to be liked and appreciated by them, but the world I live in is such that industry as such does no more fund systematically research of the kind I'm interested in. They send me to the foundations, and then everything is friendly and okay. So that's one remark which I just say so as to avoid having people spending 3 years working on some executive to find out that they should have worked with the guy from the foundation. The second thing is not only the foundations that have the purpose of financing research, but many foundations actually do finance research. But they will not finance it because it has set complexity on top of it. It has to be something specific that is of interest to somebody, and I think that's completely reasonable. And as you say, the complexity thing is then perhaps, hopefully, an added value, but there has to be a core to that particular project. Then there's the policymakers, and my experience actually, there's a lot of money still for studies funded by policymakers. I want to be very explicit about a point that I find delicate and rarely addressed, which is why I do it and take the liberty of doing it. How do you deal with a policymaker who is trying to do a good job, who would like to have some cognitive tools, whatever, but to the best of your understanding, is making a mistake? That's a situation we're in quite often. I feel quite strongly about the Eurozone crisis. I am not fully supportive of the policy pursued by the German government, who pays research I do, and I had to learn how to interact with people in a respectful way that they find useful, without hiding the fact, and that's an interesting point, a smart person likes it to be challenged and criticized in a respectful, constructive mode, of course. But it's a delicate thing. It's a big difference if you work for a guy where you share the goal and the way he proceeds and you just try to provide stuff he can use, and when you work for a guy where there's a tension, and the tension can run quite deep. The truth is what we try to grab, what's the word, grip, have a grip on complexity, okay, actually is at odds with the way many, many decision makers and policy makers operate. And Lex, you said it, I mean, in economics, there's a certain tradition, and most policymakers have been trained in that tradition. And we are challenging it. It is possible, I mean, that's why I'm saying it, but I think it's good to be aware of it. Our job is not simply to reinforce what's out there. On the other hand, if you simply go there and say, look, what you're doing here is wrong, now I tell you how to do it, that's childish. It is difficult to navigate that relationship well. I have had the experience, and I want to close with this, that I was paid for a project. While doing the project, I engaged in some rather tense discussions with pretty high-level decision makers. And they asked me to spend time to tell them my criticism and not to write it in the report. And it was quite, they didn't say, you shall not publish this on TV, whatever. They say, we cannot afford having our label on a document that says what you are thinking, but we want to know. And it was an important experience, and I keep working with the people, and I think that's part of the tension we have to be able with. Perhaps it's complex.
That sounds complex, but straight. Thank you very much. Rutger, you will close the session and we can go for drinks.
I will be very short. Just one remark after this discussion. I'm very pleased with what happened today, and I'm also very pleased with the things that we've did in the past year. I'd like to thank a few people for that, but I should say that, of course, the ideas, many of the ideas, and also the vibrant energy of this community will be such that this 20 million discussion is not relevant. Because basically what we are going to happen is we get good ideas, whatever will find its funding. I should really say that. It will be quite great if we get a government program. That will be great. Now, let me tell you the following. Peter is working very hard in a very interesting network with many industrial people to actually make the contacts. It was not very clear, but they're in. So they will happen. Whether it will be funded, we don't know. But I am certain that if this continues in whatever way, and we continue our discussion as a program committee, something very nice will happen. Maybe not in the way that we will expect. I like to say that. Now, then, first of all, I want to thank, of course, our program committee that has been active to get the paper on grips, with the 3 grips. No, we will get to grips to that. So that was great, and also the people who supported it. I really enjoyed the discussion we have. We will continue this discussion. We will make a nice and very interesting program proposal. There are many, I don't know whether this still works, but there are many people that participate. We will also share it with the community. That will come in a few months' time. Then the second point is we actually will consolidate our